Hello and welcome to our second open mic session of Cymera 2020. I will not delay the proceedings any longer. We're going to start with Erica Stewart-Jones reading her story Lobster.
Lobster. The tickle woke me the next day. Scratching didn't help, it just made it itchy and sore. I spent the whole day trying heat packs, ice packs, numbing cream, but it steadily got worse. On Saturday, when the niggle had become the scratching of the devil's fingernails, I reached back ready to cut it out with a scalpel if need be, when my fingertips encountered a lump. I explored it for a moment, circling the peak, then pressed down slightly to gauge the solidity. It was big to be something that had not been there the day before. I asked Callum to look at it, but all he saw was a spot, red and angry. He suggested washing more often. In case he was right, I washed myself 4 times that day, using body scrub, micellar water, pore cleansing gel. When I checked again that evening, the spot was gone. Only because it had hatched. As I caught my eye in the bathroom mirror the next morning, I watched a little insect crawl out of my hair. A tiny body, black and scaly, with long feelers at the front and 2 tiny claws, it looked nothing so much as a miniature black lobster. I should have yelled, you're thinking, maybe danced around like a bullfighter and wrenched the thing from my head. I didn't. It seemed oddly familiar to me, an inky crustacean born of my own body. I looked at it. It looked at me. And then it climbed back between the strands of my hair. I could feel little pinpricks tracking across my scalp. Then it settled near my left ear. I thought I could hear a breathy sound, like a whisper on the edge of hearing, but the harder I tried to listen, the quieter it was. So I spat the toothpaste foam into the sink, and I went on with my day. My sister was already sitting at her usual table when I arrived for brunch, feet crossed neatly underneath the blonde wood chair. The serving staff were watching her from the other end of the cafe, and they loved her there. No matter if I spoke the exact right words to the trendy staff and laughed for the exact right number of seconds at their attempts at banter, I could never manage to have the same effect. She smiled when she saw me, like a shark. As I sat down, the gorgeous young waiter brought over her egg white omelette and placed it down next to her cup of herbal tea. She smiled up at him with genuine warmth, and he was caught for a moment in her solar rays, helpless. She handed me the menu. I put it flat on the table, and I folded my arms on top of it and ordered a coffee. The waiter didn't even look at me, just nodded. "How are you?" Sandy said. Good opening gambit. "I'm fine," I said. "Eat something." "No, thank you." She sighed. Distraction was usually a good ploy at this point. "How's Alan?" "He's fine," she said. "Why aren't you eating?" "I'm not hungry." "Why not?" I felt a little twinge on my scalp. I nearly reached up to scratch it, but then I remembered my lobster. Was it trying to tell me something? "I ate before," I said. "Is it the money thing? Because you know I'll buy you breakfast if you need me to. You just have to ask." The lobster dug in its claws, making me gasp, preventing me from replying. "Have you spoke to Mum?" she asked next. "Not yet. She's worried about you. We all are." "We." "I'm fine." She waved a fork at me and then seemed to regret how it made her look. "You don't look fine." "Thank you." She put her knife and fork neatly down on her plate next to her half-eaten omelette. "Well, if this is the mood that you're in today, then I'll get going. I have a lot of things to get done." She unfolded a £20 note and wedged it under her plate. Then she pointed at my phone lying next to my arm. "Call Mum," she said. As she stood up, I noticed she was wearing a very strange dress. It was a normal navy wrap dress, but stitched into the front was the silhouette of a much slimmer woman. It was highly visible because it was picked out in shiny gold thread. "Sandy?" She turned back in the middle of putting on her long, swingy coat and raised her eyebrows as if to say, "Go on." "How long have you had that dress?" "This dress? Forever. You've seen it before." "I have." "I wore it to your birthday." "Thanks for remembering." She sounded irritated. I hadn't meant to be irritating. "It's nice," I said to placate her, and something jostled my tongue. "Very slimming." She paused and gave me a look. I'm not good at deciphering her, but I know when I'm being looked at. Then she smiled. "Thank you," she said. And as the coat folded across her and she swished out of the cafe, I saw the gold threads were a little less shiny than before.
Thank you, Erica. Next up, we have David Whitmarsh reading The Long Fall.
Hello, my name is David Whitmarsh, and I would like to read for you an excerpt from my work in progress, a science fiction novel called The Long Fall. The story follows the fortunes of a group of survivors of a war of extermination. They find themselves on a planet where the days and years are much longer than Earth's, where the climate is extreme, and where their presence arouses a level of curiosity. This chapter is called Remy and the Red Wolf. Old and slow, that's what she was now, old and slow and hungry. Half a year she had wandered the forests alone, catching what she could, but mostly scavenging the remnants of the kills of others. Sometimes she would be invited to share a kill and a song by a prime whose territory she crossed, trading news for food. Half a year. She had been one, first of her prime, but 3 had borne 2 cubs, taking their number from 7 to 9. 9 they could not remain. They had sung softly of how to resolve the problem in their den through the coldest part of the night. 5 was ready to move on, to travel as she herself had in her youth, but that would still leave them as 8. There was a simple solution. She had had a good run, led many successful hunts, sung at the convocations. It was the right time for her to leave, before age made her a burden. They argued out of love and respect, but deep down they understood, and they accepted her decision. She left without number, but with pride in the health and strength of the Crooked River Prime that she had led through 3 winters, 3 summers. Half her adult life. Night had fallen. This pleasant warmth would linger until late, but in hours to come the world would freeze again. The cold nights were hardest. The day would soon come for her to leave this world. Soon, but not quite yet. She padded along the narrow trail through the undergrowth, slow and silent, following the scent of the prey. Ahead, the mouse deer bleated as if distressed. A loud rustling and breaking of branches came from the same direction. Perhaps it was injured. She was close when she heard the final squeal. The powerful red scent of blood filled the air, and something else, sharp, unfamiliar. She hesitated. There was only one other hunter in these woods that a healthy red wolf need fear. This was not that scent, but then she was weakened by age and hunger. Hunger drove her on with stealth and caution. Beneath the gentle glow of the other world, the light of the night, the prey lay on its side, blood pooling from a deep wound in its throat, a hind leg stretched behind, caught in something. Beside it, an animal of a kind she had never seen before, though she had heard rumour. A maker of some kind, 4 limbs ending in grasping hands like the chittering tree dwellers of the far south. Debate in the primes centred on whether these were the same as the makers of old, long since banished from this world. Those who had seen them said not, and at a glance she could see they were right. Smaller, almost hairless, no tail that she could see, and from the look of what this one was doing, flesh-eaters. It pulled and worked at the vine to free the deer's hind leg. She saw and understood. A made thing, a cunning trap. The maker heaved the prey onto its shoulders, stood erect on its hind legs, and walked away, heedless of the noise it made crashing through the undergrowth. She emerged from her hiding place and lapped up what she could of the spilled blood before following the maker's trail. Perhaps it would leave something of the kill. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that.
Up next, we have a returning favourite from Cymera last year, Adriana Polito, reading from her new work, 6 Shamans and a Visionary.
Hello, my name is Adriana Polito. Last year, I was fortunate enough to be part of the Cymera Festival, reading an extract from my book, The World Within, a metaphysical, psychological, philosophical, spiritual journey on a planet in a different universe. The book talks about dreams and where we go when we sleep, and there's an adventure story in there too. During lockdown in 2020 this year, I started penning the prequel to The World Within called Six Shamans and a Visionary. The first book took me around 6 years to write. The idea or the inciting incident had occurred 10 years prior to that, so you're looking at 16 years in the making. Six Shamans and a Visionary had been bubbling away for a while, but the actual time it took to write was 16 days. So it's a little lockdown creation. I'm going to read to you an excerpt from the book, and the shamans are on a year-long pilgrimage, and their objective is to find 11 Supreme Court judges for the new vision of the planet's administrative and judicial layout in light of a new awakening, societal and spiritual awakening. And so they've been tasked to find some judges that have certain characteristics and qualities, and it's very much more focused on certain traits rather than law degrees. So facets such as love, compassion, virtue, patience, integrity, etc. In this scene, the shamans and visionary are having a well-deserved break about halfway through their journey. Once they eventually arrived there, the collective spent 2 weeks at Shark Bay. It was called Shark Bay because of the high infestation of desert sharks, large beasts with many teeth. They didn't like the taste of Venezuelans and would often keep to the deeper waters, but a few attacks had been known in past times. It was a period of reinvigoration for the collective. They had hired 2 large beach huts. They spent the evenings eating barbecued fish and dipping their toes in the warm sand. It was a chance to take off their ceremonial robes and let the syrup kiss their skin. Tremendos kept her robe on. Visionaries did not syrup bathe, but they could swim or paddle with them on. They appreciated invigorating effects of the Rocco Ocean. Its salty particles nourished their hair and skin. It was Luther who benefited most from this part of the pilgrimage. Luther spent every day in the ocean. He felt there was something about this seawater that was healing him. At first, he was fearful of its strong pull. The sea in Venezuela was sensitive to emotion. It was a living, breathing thing. Sometimes it would do its own thing. Other times it would reflect an overriding emotion picked up by people or animals. The sea would toss Luther up, down and around in the surf. Luther learned to hold his breath for a long time. One day a riptide almost pulled him down. He was so frightened by this that he almost didn't step foot in the sea again. But Luther knew he was battling something deep in these waters, something internal that he hadn't addressed. The day after the riptide incident, he ventured out again. Shine, who was normally scared of the sea, decided to join him. They held hands and went in. Soon the waves were bouncing them about. Shine started to panic. She looked over at Luther. The fear in his face was tremendous. She decided to put on a brave face and rise above her own fear to help Luther. "Luther, look at me," she said. "Remember, the sea may have her way with you. She may pull you this way and the next. She may hurt you with the hidden rocks beneath her surface, and she may temporarily suffocate you with her might, but if you relax, if you don't fight it, she will always wash you up to shore. You will bob up from the waves. Let her guide you home."
Thank you, Adriana. And next we have David Wardrop reading from The Gardens of Zarma.
The Gardens of Zarma is the most beautiful place in the universe, more amazing than any of the nebula tours, more incredible than that giant supernova that I forgot the name of. The Gardens of Zarma has the biggest collection of plants in the universe, over 1 million different species from hundreds of different planets. The planet Zarma is very much like the planet of Earth. the same size with more water and one moon. The moon is called Azak, and it is the loveliest moon I have ever seen. And that is saying a lot because I once went on the moon tour of Norjach, a planet bigger than Jupiter that has 70 moons. Azak is a splendid pastel pink. The gardens cover 1/4 of the planet. The gardens of Zarma are located on an area of land called Lomek, an area roughly about the same size as Africa, but in a diamond shape, with many islands to the south and east. The gardens of Zarma have thousands of greenhouses and hundreds of cold houses. Most of the greenhouses are for arid plants, because a lot of the planets and moons have vast desert regions. There are thousands of different types of gardens, from Lapton, floating garden, to the cave gardens of the Zendar moon. The planets of the Zendar moon live off chemicals instead of photosynthesis, and because of this, they are fantastically coloured. The planet Lapton has a very thin but livable atmosphere, and because of the light gravity, a lot of the plants float through the air. People from all over the universe come to see the gardens, and because of the size of the gardens of Zarma, people and aliens often stay for years. One day on Zarma consists of 30 hours. Montar is the Zarman equivalent of spring. Montar lasts roughly about half of an Earth year. Somehow the Earth plants manage to survive.
Next this afternoon, we have some poetry for you from Mac Logan, reading 2 poems together entitled Darkness.
Darkling Mine. Therein the brooding shadow lies, a darkling heart that never cries, nor sheds a tear, or even cares if terror grips you unawares. It pricks soul's peace with awful dreams, and hears your moans and silent screams. You're paralysed in quaking days, as demons stew a cruel braze. And so you baste in what might be, the torment doom-filled fallacy. Stress bites hard, corrodes your soul, and once tight gripped ye cannae thole. The darkling claws, obsidian sharp, may drag you moaning o'er the scarp. A writhing ball you fall away, till sudden glows the light of day. There twisted in bedclothes you lie, and face the day with twitchy eye. What solace is the hamster's wheel? Is anguish all we truly feel? In the dark corner, smothered, hidden, cobweb bound, cached facets twitch, yet gather dust. No window dare transparent show the fury, dread, and craven lust. There in the dark restrain they twitch, sob and spark, yet never die. Deep in seams of psyche hid, caged, not dormant, still they lie. Puppy-like they squirm and strain, mutated, freedom always near. Unexpected, crouched to pounce, through lost control, a cause for fear. And yet the windows of a face, a voice, kind eyes, will bear disclose, where wriggles primal turmoil deep, tied tight by silken knots and bows. Convention safe, forgather we, as rules of conduct bind us close. When bindings burst with wild effect,
And last but not least for today, we have a story of teleportation. The Rose Appears by Dave Robb.
Anybody could have run the length of the facility and delivered the rose by hand in the time it took for the matter double inversion to complete. But it was long-distance transportation that we were working towards. In theory, matter could be relocated from Scotland to New Zealand in the time it took one person to cross a football pitch. Bethany flew out to Queenstown a week later. The experiments began right away. Bethany and her new team communicated via satellite, appearing always to be in the best humour. Vegetables and cuts of meat dispatched across the earth arrived in a minute or so and showed no structural abnormalities. Eventually, the away team were cooking and eating the comestible specimens we sent them, remarking that they tasted just fine. It was really a question of programming and processing power. The more complex the organism, the more RAM we'd need, and the more imperative it was that the algorithms were flawless. And the programming was Bethany's area of expertise. The first live specimen to undergo matter inversion was a mouse named Higgsy. He survived. He did better than survived. He appeared completely unfazed at having been phased. Of course, it did him no good since we vivisected him immediately afterwards, but this was momentous. The higher-ups allowed a few more animal tests, more mice, a rabbit, an octopus, before insisting that we turn our talents towards human matter inversion. Bethany was already shaken by the animal trials. I could see how exhausted she was over the satellite link. Keeping up with the company's schedule meant a lot of late-night programming, and a little mistake on her part could result in, well, one very lost octopus.
Thank you once again to all of our lovely readers for today. That has been the last open mic session of Cymera 2020. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival, and we hope to see you again in 2021. Goodbye.